Hey everybody, welcome to another Diggers Cast. We're all back this week, Matt, Terry, myself, and today we wanted to get into talking about something that as sportsmen, racers ourselves, how we think about something that maybe if you're watching this, you're not into racing at all and you're just kind of curious about it. So maybe you've seen television Street Outlaws, or you're watching this because you also are a sportsman drag racer and you've got some thoughts or opinions on what a show like Street Outlaws may mean for the sport of drag racing, how you view it. So Terry, you kind of had this one on your list of things. What's your thought?
Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. When Street Outlaws first hit the TV waves, which was actually 10 years ago already, hard to believe. Uh, I thought these guys are absolutely nuts. They're out here on a street with, drag cars, certainly not cars that are street cars. And they're running down street that's really narrow. There's no traction. There's telephone poles on the side of the road. There's a curb on the side of the road. Cars parked, buildings. It's like these guys are nuts. And what
Ah,
people are looking at and going, oh yeah, drag racers are nuts. Uh, and maybe to a certain extent, there's some truth there, but I don't particularly, or never did particularly care for this uh, biker type Hell's Angel attitude towards, what drag racing is. Because certainly the sport had its origins back where you didn't have a drag strip. So you had, if you wanted to race, you had to race your buddy or somebody you didn't like that had a hot car out on the street. Okay. So they're kind of going back to the origins of what started racing, but organized racing really got started in the early 50s, right after World War II. They were actually racing before World War II, like out on the Southern California dry lakes, but there were no organized drag strips. After World War II, there was an opportunity with abandoned airstrips and stuff like that that people could actually start racing on asphalt in a more controlled environment. That's not to say there were guardrails. There were lots of drag strips where there were dangerous conditions, and we've kind of learned as we've gone along. But still, this like leather jacket, comb your hair back. That's not me. Uh, Attitude, to bad guy attitude, and even in Street Outlaws, the guys are up in their face and pushing people around and swearing at each other, doing all this kind of stuff, and that's not truly representative of what I believe our sport to be. But if you're watching the Discovery Channel and seeing this stuff, which is on programs almost every day of the week, you might get that attitude, and I don't particularly like that kind of persona for our sport.
I agree. It's like the Mad Max of drag racing, essentially.
Now,
it's interesting because I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And the thing about that jumps out at me as I think about this topic is that there are some takeaways from it that I think are good for the sport, and that like I don't know what the number would be, but there has to be some research on it just from ratings for the show or whatever. But just how many people are exposed to drag racing because the show is on all the time. I mean, you can turn on the TV almost any time of day now and go by Discovery Channel or something, and there's an old episode. There's drag racing on TV. Like as a kid, it was like you had to wait till the wide world of sports might be showing the Winter Nationals or something, and that was your exposure to drag racing. Now you can turn the TV on almost any day and see these people, lining their cars up, and they've kind of made a shift. It seems like over the seasons of like going from racing on the street with no lights on somewhere in Oklahoma to now they're on tracks and, they're talking no prep or small tire. Like they're really starting to wrap some of that stuff into it. But I think there's something positive from it, that it brings some attention to the sport. But I think you're right. Like it's not always the best attention. The thing that also I personally don't really care too much for, but is a big part of drag racing. I don't mean to knock it necessarily. It's got its spot, I guess, but is the gambling aspect. Like I've never quite understood or been a part of that, but the grudge racing kind of thing of where, you know, people are throwing money around. I think that's a big part of street racing that I just don't know about or have been involved in. That it's like, hey, we're betting on who's going to win this particular go down or race, but it does attract some kind of dangerous situations at times.
Yeah. You know what? I think the cars are pretty cool. I won't say they're all cool, but I think the majority of them are. Me personally, I have no interest in it. I couldn't name you one person on the show. I think I've seen Lizzie Musey on the show maybe a couple times. Who I might add, got to say some prayers for that gal. What an amazing gal, going through a whole lot right now. But anyways, I'm not really into it. It's not really my thing. I think it kind of draws some kind of misconception about how drag racing is. Um, I think there may be some positives out of it. Like some people are into, the Street Outlaws might be more curious about how it is in a controlled professional environment with NHRA, IHRA, and that might be helping our side gain some more viewership, which I think that's a positive. From a person who has a profession such as I do in the parts industry, that's just more people calling and ordering parts for the cars for what they blow up on the street, or for the, the telephone pole they might hit or something. But,
Well, and I gotta hand it to, I mean, the promoters that put on these kinds of races, be it a Street Outlaws race or like there's some of these other, radial tire guys. I don't know a lot about that side of the sport, honestly, but like Duck X or whatever promotions, I mean, they throw a race and the pro mod guys come out and the small tire guys come out. I mean, I watch plenty of that when I see it streaming online, and my God, the crowds that come for that make you think of the crowds you used to see at an NHRA national event in the 90s, where the stands were packed and it was just thick with people walking around, and they got, I don't like it, crammed everybody on the starting line. Like, hey, let's all stand around the car. Maybe it'll run over my foot. But like, you can't knock that they get a turnout. And there's something there about that I think needs to, I don't know what it is about that, but they're doing something right, or they're attracting enough attention that they're getting a good crowd. Attendance at those races is big.
Yeah. All's fine and well until somebody gets hurt, and all those people on the starting line, it's only a matter of time, and there's a lot of people up there that have no clue, what to look out for, or, that it worries me. I don't think it's necessary to have that many people on the starting line. That to me is just a safety risk, That's just my
I
two
think
cents on that.
I don't want to necessarily speak out of turn because I haven't watched that close, but I've seen, I've watched some podcast things with like uh Lyle Barnett, Stevie Jackson. They do their podcast, and those guys dip their toe. I mean, they're a big part of that world, from
Yeah.
racing that they came up through. And I don't know that they necessarily like it either. I want to say I've seen plenty of things where they're, dogging people about doing all kinds of goofy stuff, trying to stage a car and everything. So, I think they all kind of call out their own to some extent, but kind of back to the question of, how does it strike kind of your average sportsman racer running super classes or brackets or something? I don't know. A recent thing that jumps out to me is, kind of, maybe there's a better way NHRA can go about trying to blend the two. They've tried this in the past, but it kind of fell on its face. At least the way I saw it was NHRA was trying to involve some of those guys in the sport a bit, or some of these different outlaw classes at different events. And Dad, I can remember being with you. I think it was the last time I was with you at the Sonoma race, and they had some of those outlaw cars. And I just remember the guy standing the thing to the moon and then just slamming it down on the pan and dragging oil down the entire track. And it was like, that's it. We're done. Everybody else who thought you were racing today, we're all done because curfew's going to come. And this guy just oiled the track down, but he put on a hell of a show. But it was like, for the racers that were there, we're like, there goes our day. We're done.
Yeah, that was Monty Fitzgerald, good guy. I enjoy talking with him. He also tried to do some promotion stuff, but his son is doing really well, coming up, all door car stuff, and that's part of it. I think is that we're dragster guys, right? We all have dragsters, but not everybody has a dragster. They don't know anything about a dragster, but hey, they have a fox-bodied Mustang. They have a
right
Ration Camaro, and maybe it's something they drive around on the street and they feel really intimidated. They're not going to take it to the drag strip. It's not very fast. It maybe makes some noise. Maybe they've done a few things to it. So kind of relate to some of the cars and some of the action better than they can watching funny cars, or pro stock cars, which don't even look like cars these days. That's a whole nother topic. But I do know some guys, friends with some people on Facebook that run door cars, and they watch that stuff pretty carefully. And you have to admit that if there wasn't small tire, big tire, radial classes, no prep, no time, it really spurred a whole lot of different classes that they run on a track, and it's all safe, and they got their that sort of thing. And it brought a lot of different people into the sport that I don't know what they were doing before they started drag racing, but certainly from a track promoter standpoint, they're loving it. I mean, but for a purist like me who grew up like, hey, we're driving dragsters and we're racing and all this stuff, and as you saw it at Rockingham, or they do at Tucson and other places where they go down to the end of the drag strip and they run backwards.
Yep.
Or like the street, there's no traction down there. And all due credit to the Street Outlaw guys or anybody doing that stuff, running very small tires and a lot of power. It's all about managing that power to not just blow the tires off completely, but so they're crazy, but they're also making a lot more money than I'm making. And
well, some of it may kind of be this whole thing of like the spectrum of what is racing. Like you've got on this side, sportsman racer, going and trying to compete at points events, their track, they're running brackets, and they're just about their operation. They're just running races. That's what they're focused on. And then on this end, you've got fans who like to watch the sport of racing. And often, we talk about, and this could be a whole nother discussion on how to make bracket racing more interesting to a casual fan, because it's not really something that draws a lot of spectators. But fans like to see, cars skating all over the place. They like burnouts and loud noise. And like, to the fan, I can see how, the Street Outlaws thing is like, this is just bitching, man. Like, look at the burnouts, and that guy, he got all squirrely, and then they bumped each other, and then they went off. And, even though that race was like a total of 300 feet, you're like, they're just racing to like not even an eighth mile, right? But it's all the excitement of that one race, and that people are betting on this guy's going to win. Oh, we lost. Like there's something there that, kind of where's the middle of the fan excitement and then the technical racing sportsman guy, and how do we pull some from maybe each side to benefit the sport as a whole? Because I think there's a lot of storytelling that the reality TV part of Street Outlaws could teach, NHRA kind of thing when it comes to what they do on TV to make it more interesting and draw a crowd.
Yeah, I agree with Uncle Terry about us being purists, I'm totally in the same boat as he is, and it's good for the tracks. Looking at it on a positive side of what Street Outlaws has done, the no prep, no time, like Uncle Terry was mentioning, that just helps the tracks be able to schedule these events. And, I'm all for that because it keeps the track open for everybody. And I think that's cool.
If you're a track promoter, if you're an owner, you love the Street Outlaw guys to come probably because just think of how many fans come through your gate that don't come for a bracket race, points race. That's just racers. Now, like when I go up to Coastal Plains, I'll see a dozen or so spectators along the fence line there at the return road. And I always think that's cool. People come out and want to watch the cars, but it's not 1,000 people crammed on the starting line like you see at one of these kind of Street Outlaw races. But then again, it's still, I think there's, it's a double-edged sword because I can recall recently at Darlington, there was a big to-do about JJ DeBoss, I think it was, or whatever, the Street Outlaw guy from Memphis. He rented the track or something like that to throw his race there. And so he just paid to have the track and do his own thing. But that's the one where they put the guy on the bed of his truck and then he did a wheel stand like halfway down the track, the guy hanging on, like, the owner's probably having a fit because like, oh my God, the insurance, like they're going to pull my license, or, you'd freak out about that kind of wild behavior, but they just do what they want, which is the appeal.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one thing, the one thing that the Discovery Channel's got going for them, they've done a really good job in delivering the drama and the intensity, the excitement that goes along with all races. I don't care if it's 15-second bracket racing. There's a lot of drama, a lot of intensity, a lot of emotions going on in racing. But, if you watch like an NHRA program and they throw down some of the sportsman guys, like, oh, here they are. But you have no idea of what they went through to get there. You have no idea of how many other rounds they went through to get there, or how much pressure was on them because of points battles or God knows what it is. But in the Street Outlaws program, they get into the shop a little bit. The guys give their commentary. They get out there. The guys are strategizing. They really build it up. And then they get them on the line and they start their bump box and all that stuff. And then they go, and then they come back and the race lasts like 4 seconds.
Yeah. Well, but you ever notice too, they edit those races together how many different ways. I mean, one, 4-second squirt across 300 feet, they draw that out to be like 4 minutes because, they've got them staging and then they show the green light and then they cut to commercial and then they come back and they redo the whole thing again. And then they show the replay about 10 times. So, I mean, they really milk that one race.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, overall, as much as and NHRA, when Street Outlaws first came out, I mean, they were putting out press releases and stuff saying, we don't condone this. This is not drag racing, blah, 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 blah. And as you pointed out, Eric, earlier, they backed off of that pretty quick when they saw how popular it was.
Yeah.
So look at what, the pro group, the Funny Car, Pro Stock, Top Fuel guys, they're putting on a race in Florida and they're going to use this, draw the names out of a bucket. And they're trying to build up more of the drama and bring more money to the racer in. So they're taking some cues from the Discovery Channel and Street Outlaws, in spite of the fact that they don't think NHRA is doing enough. So they're trying to prove to NHRA, I think, that, hey, look, you got to do more to draw more fans and get more exposure, which equates to better sponsorships for people. Because you get enough exposure, you're going to get a lot more people putting up money for putting their name on the side of a car.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's going to be a stream only event. I think it's on Flow Racing, I believe.
Yeah, I think
So
you can watch a lot of all the packages they put together about the build up to it, the different racers involved, but then like you will have to pay to watch the event run.
yeah,
So they want you to buy a ticket basically, but I remember jumping in on the flow thing, not kind of wondering what that was about when you ran the Midwest race, so I could watch you run. And I don't know if it was the flow guys or if it was just the announcers that were part of XRP or the Midwest series, but I thought they did a really good job of taking what normally would be treated as just a sportsman race, and maybe if it was getting just basic streaming coverage, there'd be some cameras and that's it, to they were interviewing the pro mod guys and they were doing a good job to try to story tell what was going on with the different racers, and just even announcing who was coming up to the line for every category. I don't care if it was just the regular brackets that were running or if it was top dragster, but they made everybody seem like, hey, these guys are the show. It was like, if I didn't know anything about racing and I was watching that because it was on flow, it'd be like, oh, this is cool. That's somebody pulling up in that car. I don't know who he is, but he sounds important.
huh,
And
right.
it made it more enjoyable as somebody watching it.
Yeah. Oh, they put a lot of good streaming services for a lot of different series anymore, and I think that says a lot, for people like us. I can't be there physically with either one of you, so anytime I get a chance to watch either one of you, I'm all over it. I mean, I really am, and I think that there is a whole lot of positive things that the Street Outlaws have brought to the sport of drag racing, um, including there's all kinds of grudge racing. It's not just them. It's every track has some kind of grudge racing each weekend. So I think there's more positives than negatives, but I've tried to watch it, but I just the gambling, the drama is just I just can't get into it. I just
I
can't.
always I always have to check myself when I feel that I'm getting a little too high and mighty or pretentious, like, oh, these street outlaw guys, they're just so stupid or something, like they're ridiculous. And I start feeling a little like arrogant about myself when I'm watching it. But then I kind of realize like, well, I've been watching it for the last hour because it's on TV, because damn it, I like racing and fast cars and burnouts, and there I am watching it. And it's kind of the same thing of like trying to say like, well, wrestling, the WWE is fake. It's like, well, no, they're really slapping the shit out of each other and throwing each other around and through tables. Like they're still doing it. And those guys are spending gobs of money on their cars. So I got to give them some
Yep.
credit. So I always kind of check myself a little bit when I start to feel a little high and mighty about watching them. But, it's
Yeah.
just, okay, it's a part of the sport that like I wouldn't get into if you gave me all the money in the world and said, hey, you want to run any race program you ever wanted to run? Running a street outlaw car would not be my chosen flavor, but I can't knock them for doing what they're doing. It's still racing, and it's drawing a lot of attention, and clearly it's a fan favorite.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. That's just, I don't know, I guess old fashioned purist kind of thing. And being a dragster guy, it just, it just doesn't do a whole lot for me until you maybe see a dragster show up there and make one run and break the car in half on a regular street. That might pique my interest a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I it's like this thing's been going on for. I looked it up today before we had this talk. They're in their 15th season.
Wow.
I don't know how all that works. There's more than one season per year, but they started in 2013 and they're still going. And how many TV shows or things happen that don't last that long? So you really got to credit that, they've got a pretty loyal fan base, because if the ratings weren't there, they wouldn't be on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and they wouldn't have created this version and that version and this town and that. I mean, they've done how many different versions of it too.
oh yeah, and I don't know if I haven't been to one of those events, but I can't imagine sitting up in the grandstands and listening to some guy yelling on the microphone going, all right, we're gonna this that
Uh,
year, whoever these guys are that get up there and just really try to hype it up and hype it up. It's kind of like, hey, get your damn car up there and let's race.
right, right. Well,
But hey, you see what happens when you go to the fuel cars are running. They're making a lot of noise. They're very unpredictable. And yes, people are looking to see somebody blow up or do something spectacular. And
yep.
they pull the stalkers around. Man, the people flee the grandstands like crazy because that's just like boring for most of
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, it's kind of, I don't know if you can make that kind of stuff exciting, but I think you can. I think you can. I think announcing at events is so important. We've seen guys like Loans and stuff kind of get pretty popular because of the job they do announcing races, but um I almost think, for stuff like stalkers and things, like you need a hype man to get up there and talk about the high winding 10,000 RPM. This guy's gonna put this thing to the moon. Like you gotta almost have like the wrestling hype guy out there getting the crowd to see past that the car is slow and get a little more into why it is so wild. Because, I think back, I just saw a picture recently, some of the Lions drag strip stuff they've been sharing, and photos of what were gasser cars that probably were, 12 seconds at best or something, running, I don't know, C gas, B gas or something. But the stands packed full of people to watch that car that probably didn't even do a wheel stand or anything, was just loud and went down there at maybe 100 miles an hour. But man, it was just full of people there at Lions. And, maybe that's just a different era, but there must have been something pretty damn exciting about it then to go watch, a 41 Willys make a rip down the strip.
Yeah, well, when it comes to announcing and stuff, there's been some really good people in the past for working for NHRA and certain tracks that have done a really good job. And I think Brian Loans and Alan Reinhart right now are just right at the top of their game. I mean, they do a really good job of, like, you bring up a stalker, and the guy's like, hey, this is a 302 in this Camaro with a two
Yeah.
barrel, man, this thing, blah, 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 blah. So they get into this kind of stuff to make you appreciate a little bit more that this thing can run in the tens with a two barrel and a 302 motor, small block, and a 3,600 pound car. Now you got to be kind of the racing hot rodder to really appreciate that kind of stuff, as opposed to like, hey, I've been to a drag race before, so I'm going to go there and have my ears blasted out and my eyes burned out. Nitro. But the fan experience, I did a few more national events last year than I would normally do, and I got to say, there were a lot of people in the grandstands. They did a pretty good job of drawing people in last year.
Yeah. Eric, I think what you said about announcing is a very important part of making the um, newbie to racing understand what goes on with these cars behind the scenes. Um, I like Alan Reinhart a lot. He's got a good voice, and the guy's very sharp. He knows what he's talking about. They're facts, and he's made himself available via his email that he gives out through his telecasts for people to reach out to him if they don't know, because who are they going to question if they have a question that they're dying to know? He's there, to answer those questions. And, I watch a lot as well. And Loans gets in there and does a lot of the sportsman racing, him and Costello. And I think you're right, Uncle Terry. They do touch base on, the combinations in stock or super stock, competition eliminator, super comp, top dragster, top sportsman, and so on. But I think announcers have a big part of every kind of racing, no matter what it is.
Yeah, I like the fact that you bring up Joe Costello. he's I'm kind of on the fence with that guy because I, he walks down the lanes of the sportsman things and talk to some of the guys. And, you know, let's face it, some of us aren't the greatest interviews, but, you know, it's stuff like, oh, we got fire. It's like, oh my God.
I got one. I forget where I got one of his stickers that says fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Extreme.
he cracks me up because he comes from a radio background like I do. He used to do like sports radio or something like that. So he kind of understands there's some kind of gimmicks that you got to land on that get people pulled in that way or remember stuff. But I know like he's dabbled in some racing himself, and I think
Yep.
he's working on a project of his own with like a Pontiac, like a GTO or something. He's got something like that. So I give those guys credits. Well, and Loans comes from a racing background himself too. So they've all been involved in the sport, and that makes a big difference for sure.
Yeah. Because Joe Costello, he makes me laugh. Like every telecast I hear, it's just ah.
We could have a whole nother long discussion on like things that NHRA or any sanctioning body might do to draw more attention to the sportsman level of racer, whether or not, they probably would discuss like, well, why do we care about that really? Do they even care about that? Because, it goes down to the almighty dollar. Does that mean any more money for them? But
Right.
certainly for like the health of the sport, I think like IHRA now under Larry Jeffers and what he's doing, and WDRA, see these different sanctioning bodies who are aimed more at a sportsman racer. They get it because they're also racers themselves. That there's like, hey, there's a story, as you mentioned earlier, Dad. There's like a story to tell for everybody who showed up at the track. You just don't know what it is and what they went through to get there and what's going on with their program, and that perhaps there's something again to kind of nod back to the storytelling of Street Outlaws that if NHRA maybe they got to pare down who's there. Maybe every sportsman category is 8 cars and it's a shootout, but can you do a quick little package on everybody who's involved so that that the people who are watching that get more background on who's actually there and why you might care if this guy wins or loses.
5 left.
Well, you know, it's still going back to the whole Street Outlaws theme on this podcast. It's like, okay, is it overall been good for the sport? I would have to say that yes, even though I'm not a huge fan of it all, but anything to a certain extent, anything that brings a little more attention, that helps tracks stay open so we can do what we like to do, uh, is certainly a positive on our end. Uh, I how long this is going to go on and what will happen if Street Outlaws goes away and some of the fan base that's on TV goes away. Is that going to hurt racetracks? Is that going to hurt some of these other classes that have developed? And, Matt, this is your bailiwick. Certainly parts suppliers, Summit, JEGS, Competition Motorsports, all these different people that are out there selling stuff. I have to imagine that they've profited from all this stuff as well.
Yeah, I get a call from time to time from people telling me that they're on the show, and I just regretfully, I'm sorry, I'm not really sure who that person is. I don't watch the show.
It has
But
to be good. It has to be good for part sales because I watch
oh, it
those
is.
and they blow their stuff up
Yeah,
every time.
yeah. But
I'm trying to get 5 seasons out of mine before I put bearings in it, and they're blowing their stuff
right,
up every pass. Send it to
right,
the moon.
right. Well, like Uncle Terry said, I think I agree with what he said. I think has it been good for our sport? Yes, I do.
Yeah, I think
Well-
I think it's been good in that it's brought in attention, and certainly you know, if it went away tomorrow, it's kind of like the little scenario you kind of point out there. Let's say it all went tomorrow and they pull the plug on the TV side of it. It certainly wouldn't affect the racing we do. You know, the bracket racing, the top dragster stuff, like that doesn't affect the kind of racing we do. But attention to the sport of drag racing overall, it certainly has added a lot more people that hear the word drag racing and have something in their head they would associate with it. You know, I just wish it wasn't always associated with the like, yeah, we're out here grudge racing on the streets. Kind of like, no. Like anytime you tell somebody like, you know, I drag race, like they immediately are thinking of that now. That's probably the biggest annoyance for somebody like myself is like, now I have to explain to you the kind of racing I do because it isn't the drag racing you're thinking of with Big Chief, you know, like that's not
Right. Right.
Well,
Mhm.
even before Street Outlaws hit TV, I can think back in the day, especially in my work life, if people said, "Oh, you drag race," you know, it's like, man, you don't fit the description or what my thoughts of a drag racer would be. You know, you ought to be tatted up and looking really nasty and wearing a bunch of leather and this, that, the other thing. Like, hey, that ain't what most of us are like out there. There's a few, but not very many.
Yeah.
no
Okay.
tats, no leather. It might
Right.
look nasty, but that's
Right.
probably about
Yeah.
They look me, got my helmet on.
it. Right. Yeah.
That's like I, work in a library.
Right. All right. Well, we're just about out of time. So comment, tell us what you thought about this subject, maybe who your favorite Street Outlaws guy is, or what kind of racing you'd do if you could. But that really gives us our final bit for this one.
Yeah. Tune in, like us, subscribe, share, Diggers TV.
Yep, diggers.